I'm Christine Malott, and this is our first Red Rising educational resource. The idea for this resource came from an idea jam we held earlier in the year, where we invited educators from all around the city to meet with us to discuss how Red Rising could better support Indigenous and non-Indigenous teachers in teaching about Indigenous topics in their classroom. We were surprised to learn that the number one thing educators said they needed was a how to get started guide. So the Red Rising education team came together and interviewed leaders in our community who are currently working to advance Indigenous education and ways of knowing. Here's what they had to say.
Every nation has a story, and every nation has a history, and every nation has teachings that are deep and sacred. And just tapping into that for all our students, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, there's a wealth of knowledge.
But to me, Indigenous education is it's very importantly that it's land-based. A lot of education of the land, with the land, on the land.
Going back to the land is Indigenous education, both content and process. So the content would be really land-based, and to understand that pre-contact for thousands and thousands of years, there were engineers and doctors and lawyers and teachers and historians and artisans, and you had to be brilliant. You had to be genius to live within the land. You'd have to know soil, you'd have to know geology, you'd have to know geography, you'd have to know physics and math and engineering, to live and to survive.
And the language is very important too. Our worldview is embedded in our languages.
How can we be good citizens in harmony with the earth? How can we be a strong community together? And so to me, that is at the heart of true Indigenous education.
It needs to start right from the beginning, and it needs to be holistic. As the Indigenous people and the original people of this land, we've always been very inclusive. So we welcome anybody into our circle, and we make space for people to come into our circle. It's our work to do that as the original people of this land.
If it takes place outside, as opposed to within four walls.
There's at least 5 other intelligences that to me are Indigenous in nature. And that is the ability to observe, to make observations, and to learn from those observations. Another intelligence is to absorb and listen and take in teachings and oral history and storytelling. Another intelligence is just expressing yourself orally and through story, your story. All our students have a story, all our teachers have stories. So to learn from story by expressing yourself orally. A 4th intelligence is the intuitive, the feeling, getting a felt sense of what's going on, EQ for lack of a better word. And finally, just doing. And again, it goes back to actually getting out of the classroom and going to the land and visiting and taking part in the community. I think activism actually is a form of Indigenous education, to get involved, to get aware, to learn and to be part of, and to take ownership of what's going on in the community.
Speaking to a population that is largely non-Indigenous, I think it's important for those students to see both Indigenous teachers coming in and sharing, and also non-Indigenous teachers having passion for these issues and saying, hey, look, like this is something that we all need to care about. Non-Indigenous students need to learn about the agreements of this land, both the official treaties, but also the unofficial treaties, the first treaties with Mother Earth. One student in particular, very outspoken family, very powerful family, and he just blurted out, no, we're learning about ancient civilizations. And he said, well, Indigenous people were still in the Stone Ages before we came, so really, right? Shelby just sort of looked at me and said, okay, let's back up the truck. and address that issue head on. Like, let's talk about that and where that idea came from and what does it mean to be civilized. What does that word even mean? Let's unpack that, and let's talk about values. And so in his mind, he wasn't saying anything wrong. He was just stating a fact, and that was how he had learned it from his family and from his past. And so that's why it's important, because these attitudes are still carried, and they're not carried apologetically.
It's important because we're located on the homelands of First Nations and Métis and Inuit people.
And that being said, all children have the right to equality and to respect and to have their stories heard and told.
A lot of students who come through our school will be policymakers, will be powerful people, will be people of privilege as they continue to grow. And so for them especially, they need to know, because if they continue to not know, we won't move forward.
It's important to always remember that we have many nations, and to always be mindful and aware of that, and think and behave from that way. We, as the original people of this land, we have a very beautiful way of life, and it's full of resilience, it's full of teachings, and we as the original people, all right from the beginning, we've always wanted to share this and to let people know who we are and how we're all together in that circle that we call a human family.
We had clan systems, matriarchal mothers who were leading our villages, and they weren't necessarily the leaders, the all-powerful woman. They were just the ones who knew the most, you know, the wisdom keepers.
And to always know which territory you're on. To me, it would be the ceremonial part. Acknowledge that you've earned that. Yeah, you've earned that in some way, and it's not self-earned. It's the spiritual realm and the people that you work with that give you that recognition.
I think Indigenous education should be delivered carefully. I think it should be delivered respectfully and with passion. I think that it is important to connect with community when delivering Indigenous education. I think that there are a number of people within our school systems and without of our school systems that have a great deal of knowledge in terms of this topic. And so if you are unsure of where to start, it is okay to ask. It is okay to ask questions, and it is okay to not know the answers. But what it is not okay to do is to just do nothing.
And there are knowledge keepers. There are people in the community that keep these teachings and are passed down from generation to generation, and they're very sacred. And I think in a respectful way, we need to call upon these people and have them visit the classroom, have the students visit them. So I think it's about building relationship as a teacher, building relationship with the Indigenous community, and building relationship with the traditional Indigenous community, the knowledge keepers. And the best way for teachers to do that is to get involved, is to come out, be in the community.
Reading is also a really, really good place to start. There are a lot of amazing books by Indigenous authors, particularly even from Winnipeg and Manitoba. All teachers have a right and a responsibility to be following our provincial mandate, but up and above that, it's the right thing to do. We have a number of Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth attending our schools that have not been taught the truth in terms of what has actually happened in terms of our Canadian history. Yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. I think even for some non-Indigenous teachers as well as Indigenous teachers that maybe haven't been raised in a cultural environment and aren't necessarily aware of their own cultural backgrounds or traditions or language, that it could be equally uncomfortable. But we ask children to do things every single day that make them uncomfortable. We ask non-Indigenous children to do things that make them uncomfortable. Come into a new space, get up, speak in front of people, take risks, get to know people, develop relationships with individuals that they don't know. We ask our non-Indigenous children to do all of those things, plus come into a system that has historically caused trauma and genocide and intergenerational effects to this day regarding their families and their culture and their traditions. And so as teachers, I think it is our right and our responsibility to be taking those risks.
They need to be supportive, they need to be understanding and loving and kind, and learn and get involved and learn and become part of the community. And I really do believe we're all in this together. Teaching in a circle format, having students learn by more than that reading and writing I mentioned, in terms of observation, listening, expressing, feeling and doing. More group projects, more presentations where students are learning from one another, more self-directed learning where students are taking responsibility for their own learning, more self-evaluation where a teacher and a student sits down together.
Worldviews that are different from your own are valid, equally valuable, and to come away with a sense of the cultural misunderstanding that occurred.
The beautiful way of life that we have, that despite our struggles and our challenges, we're still here. Our children, our grandchildren, and those yet to come, they'll only make it more stronger with the help of our relatives, our non-Indigenous relatives, and how we can work together.
Some concerns and sustainability, and as we, as newcomers, are slowly coming to the realization that Indigenous people have always had, that we need to be responsible to Mother Earth first.
I went to all these privileged schools in Winnipeg, but I went to rural schools when I was younger, and those were the places where I most learned about my education when I lived up north. My Indigenous education, I learned hoop dancing and beading and all this different stuff. We got to really know the community.
So you've just heard from a few of our community members here in Treaty 1 territory, and I'm sure that you noticed there are a few common themes that come up when discussing Indigenous education. Themes such as the importance of place or land, community, culture, and story. Red Rising Education is excited to announce that for our first project, we've created a special edition magazine and unit plans to be used in the middle years classroom and up to teach topics such as identity, land and water, community, and resistance. We are also collaborating with educators from around the world to create more authentic content for you to use in your classrooms. So if you're an educator and if you'd like to be involved, please feel free to reach out to us. You can purchase our special edition magazine as well as our unit plans by visiting us online at www.redrisingmagazine.ca or emailing us at info@redrisingmagazine.ca. Miigwech, and thank you for embarking on this journey with us.